Every once in a while, a player comes along who's a legitimate star who plays for an underperforming franchise during his short time as a healthy NBA player, before injuries take place and derail the progression. And over time, people begin to lose track of how good this guy was. Unfortunately, Gilbert Arenas is one of those players who fits this description. Today, we're taking a moment to remember his talent and impact he had on the league during his short stint as an NBA star. Arenas was drafted with the 31st overall pick in the 2001 draft by the Golden State Warriors. Not much was expected of Arenas as he slipped to the second round and wasn't even the Warriors' first selection. The 6'3" point guard was entering the NBA with the chip on his shoulder as he took the jersey number 0, symbolizing the amount of minutes many quote experts said he would play in the NBA. Not only did Arenas play minutes in his rookie season, but soon enough, he was starting for Golden State. By the end of his debut season, Gilbert had averages of 10.9 points, 3.7 assists, 2.8 rebounds, and 1.5 steals on 45% shooting. But it would be in his second season where he would really make people regret passing up on him on draft day. Arenas started at the point guard spot in all 82 games of the Warriors' 02-03 regular season, and in those games, he averaged 18.3 points, 6.3 assists, 4.7 rebounds, and 1.5 steals on 43% shooting. The performance over the season was enough for him to win the league's Most Improved Player award. With the Warriors missing the playoffs again, Gilbert was ready to test the free agency market. The Washington Wizards made an offer of 6 years, $60 million. The Warriors couldn't match the offer since they were over the salary cap, so as a 22-year-old, Gilbert was joining the Wizards as he was quickly approaching the best seasons of his career. By his second season with the team, he was ready for his breakout year as an NBA superstar. He led Washington to the franchise's best record since the 1970s with a 45-37 record, all while putting up averages of 25.5 points, 5.1 assists, 4.7 rebounds, and 1.7 steals on 43% shooting. These numbers were good enough to earn his first All-Star selection and also his first of 3 All-NBA selections. At this point, Arenas' game had all the makings of an offensive superstar. He could facilitate well as the point, but he would much rather be aggressive offensively, as he had fantastic dribbling abilities and a lethal outside shot, as he was not only a volume shooter, but a strong volume shooter from three-point range. The Wizards were now entering the 2005 playoffs as a 5th seed. Gilbert led the way as they eliminated the 4th-seeded Chicago Bulls in 6 games, before they were then eliminated by a far more talented Miami Heat team of Dwayne Wade and Shaquille O'Neal. Gilbert was heading into his best seasons of his career as only a 24 and 25-year-old. That's not typically a player's prime years, which are usually a few years later, like around 27 and 28 years old. But unfortunately, the mid-20s Arenas was the best version of him we would ever see, because when his decline happened, it happened fast. Over those next 2 years, he averaged 29 points per game, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, and 2 steals on 43% shooting and 36% from three-point range. Among these terrific years were epic games where he stood toe-to-toe with a couple of the greatest players of all time. The first instance was in the first round of the 2006 playoffs against the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was an iconic battle between 2 of the brightest stars in the Eastern Conference, LeBron James and Gilbert Arenas. They went back and forth, alternating on better solo performances, but by the end of Game 6, it was LeBron's Cavs who won the series, as LeBron averaged 35, 7, and 5, while Gilbert was right behind him with numbers of 34, 5, and 5. The other instance was just months later in that calendar year, a regular season matchup with the Los Angeles Lakers in their building, as both Kobe Bryant and Gilbert Arenas were ready to put on a show offensively. Both players were alternating baskets throughout the game. Gilbert had been torching all the different guards the Lakers threw at him defensively, and late in the fourth quarter, he had over 40 points with the Wizards up comfortably. But that's when Kobe led the Lakers to make a huge fourth quarter comeback, pushing the game into overtime. In the overtime, Kobe decided to exclusively defend Gilbert Arenas. This was one of those situations where the Mamba accepted the challenge, and if he had shut down Arenas, we would look back on this as one of those legendary moments where Kobe came out on top. But that's not what happened. Arenas absolutely dominated the final 5 minutes, scoring 16 points in the overtime alone as he shredded Kobe and the Lakers' defense. Washington won the game as Arenas finished with 68 and 8, besting Kobe's 45, 10 and 8. His 60 points is still to this day the most points scored in Wizards franchise history, and it's also the most points ever scored against Kobe Bryant. Just 5 days later, Arenas would drop 54 points on the team with the second best record in the entire league, the Steve Nash-led Phoenix Suns. This was peak Gilbert Arenas. At this point in his career, he was just days away from his 25th birthday. He was one of the greatest and most dominant offensive players in the league, and he was only getting better as it was still early in his career, or at least we thought it was. Just a few months later, in a matchup versus the Bobcats, Gerald Wallace collided with Gilbert's leg, which resulted in him tearing his meniscus in his right knee. He would never get his legs back after this point, because in the next 2 years, Arenas would have 3 separate surgeries on that same right knee. This was essentially the beginning of the end of his career. His talent was slipping quickly, so when the infamous locker room's weapons incident happened with Javaris Crittenton, Arenas was suddenly much more expendable, and eventually they dealt him to the Orlando Magic. But at that point, he was basically just a shell of what he once was, and wasn't in the league much longer. He was only 30 years old when he played his last game in the NBA as a member of the Memphis Grizzlies. In his short career, he made 3 All-Star teams and 3 All-NBA teams. He was very ahead of his time, as he was a crazy good scorer who also always had the green light and shot a tremendous amount of three-pointers, even attempting as many as 8 per game during the prime of his career. If you adjust for inflation to the modern NBA in terms of the amount of three-pointers attempted, then he would have shot around 13 three-pointers a game, just like James Harden currently does. Speaking of James Harden, a prime Gilbert Arenas reminds me a lot of James Harden. Not saying they're equal in talent, but very similar in terms of skill set and play style. Both can handle the rock extremely well and are a nightmare to defend in isolation situations. Both play the point guard position and can facilitate very well, but more often than not, their tendency is to look to score. Both guys are lethal scorers on the offensive end, but on the defensive side of the court, they're just decent on their best days. Both are volume shooters who were both consistently among the league leaders in three-point attempts. All things considered, they're pretty similar if you ask me. So just how good was Gilbert Arenas really? Well, he wasn't a great defensive player, and he wasn't always the most efficient in terms of field goal percentage. But he was a great all-around player who had a significantly greater true shooting percentage, and in terms of one-on-one basketball in his prime, he was one of the best scorers to ever do it. Let me know in the comments section how you think a prime Gilbert Arenas would do in today's modern NBA. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.